Welcome to Not Starving Artist, the podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Benson, money coach and equity actor. I am your financial cheerleader, here to help you build your financial confidence and have power over your money. The best part, no budgeting or bi-weekly paychecks required. I went from being a broke BFA grad having weekly panic attacks about money to a financially confident, wealth-building actor and business owner. Money gets to feel fun, simple, and sexy, and I am going to show you how. Welcome back, everyone, to the podcast. You are in for such a treat today because today we have Katelyn on the podcast. Katelyn and I worked together last year inside of one-on-one coaching. She is an incredible artist and human. We have so much to talk about today. And before we dive in, I would love for her to introduce herself.
Hi. So thank you very much for the intro, Brooke. So my name is Katelyn, like Brooke said. I am an artist based in New York City, singer, actress, dancer, and also currently a personal trainer at Equinox.
Incredible. And some of those things, the being in New York, being a trainer at Equinox, those are new things as of after we did one-on-one coaching together. And we talked about a lot of those things during that time. So what I want to do is I want to talk about where you were before money coaching, like where your headspace was, when you signed up, what you were struggling with. And then we're going to talk about all the incredible things you did inside of our container. So tell us, where were you mentally, logistically, when you signed up for money coaching last year?
So yes, when I heard about you and first kind of had that seed planted, I would say financially, I was doing well. I was working at a gym back in Michigan. I'm originally from right outside of Detroit, Michigan. And I had gotten to a point where I was very comfortable, but my entire life, I would say, I have never really had a good relationship with money. Didn't know what to do with it, would always just put aside, my bills, all of the responsible stuff, and then just like spend the rest of it. Be like, why don't I have any money in savings? Or I'd have to like scramble to save my tax returns and put that in my savings. I'm like, yeah, we'll call that my savings. But then I would end up digging back in. Just no semblance, any idea of what to do with money. Grew up with two completely different parents when it came to money approaches. So that kind of screwed with my head, and just never was really taught the proper way to work with my money, organize my money. And so money conversations were very uncomfortable for me. I knew I had this move to New York coming up. And I had done a lot of really good work, in my personal life, my professional life as a trainer, moving back to New York. And I knew I wanted to get that sorted out. And so that's where you came along. And I knew I wanted a little bit more structure and a little bit more mental clarity behind my money. And I loved that was your approach. And it wasn't just like I was hiring somebody to tell me what to do with my money. It was a whole mind, spiritual, all of the things.
I love it. So let's talk about your move to New York first, because you had previously lived in New York and then you moved out of New York, right? Pandemic times, right? As so many people, right? And then decided to move back to the city. So I'd love for you to talk about like what your headspace was like when it came to thinking about New York. And then while we were coaching together, we, of course, implemented some strategy, but then also did some thought work on that move. So tell us about what were the anxieties and stressors and fears about New York to start? And what was the decision like that you and your partner made? Like, this is happening. We're making the move.
Sure. So I always knew that the end goal was to move back. I had, at the time when I signed up with you, I had a lot of savings. I would say a substantial amount by my standards, which is maybe not as much to other people's. And I ended up, investing in working with you, which I am very thankful for and don't regret for a second. But then, of course, I suddenly have less in my savings, and that started to make me freak out a little bit. Luckily, together, my partner and I, together, we had a good amount of money for the move, But I knew as a trainer and seeing how training worked in Michigan, I knew I was going to have to start from scratch again. And that scared the hell out of me. Am I allowed to use those types of words?
Of course you can. It's the Not Starving Artist podcast. Let's say fuck, baby. Keep going.
I was fucking terrified because not having that cushion just freaked me out. I wouldn't even know where to begin to tell you how that made me feel. The decision to move honestly kind of came from our rent being up at the end of November. And I had spent 2 years in Michigan when I thought I was only going to spend 6 months there. And so when it came to moving, we knew we had enough money to move. But the idea of starting completely from scratch was a lot for me. And if I didn't have you and your coaching, I would have probably just spent all my money and wouldn't have had any sort of a plan. And so through coaching and talking through these things, I was able to dig into the feelings that were coming up, which is something very new for me. Like, I've done therapy, I know how to dig into all that stuff, but never about money. And even like with our very first consultation that we did together, which is why I fell in love with your coaching, was I would say I was getting uncomfortable and you would pause and you'd be like, okay, can we dig into what is making you uncomfortable and why are you feeling this way? And instead of panicking, kind of digging in and seeing and verbalizing my fears, because I'm a verbal processor, helped me to be able to have those fears, but alongside it, be like, okay, let's come up with a plan. Let's attack this. And we're a lot better off than, the little anxious voice in my head says we are.
Yeah. So with that, I'm so glad you brought that up because this was definitely a pairing of like the emotions, the thoughts, the fears, the anxieties, but they were also grounded in some very like logistical, tactical circumstances, right? So I know the first thing that we did, what I always do is like, let's make sure the house isn't on fire. Like, let's get the plan in place, make it run smoothly. Like, let's figure out the logistics and the strategy so you're good to go. And then all of the thoughts and feelings and emotions of fear, anxiety, doom and gloom, whatever, that start popping up, we can point those thoughts, that logical part of your brain, to the strategy to be like, hey, we're good. So why are you still here? Right? Yeah. So we always do the strategy first, and then we know like where we can dive into the root of some of those emotional things. So let's talk about the strategy that we implemented. Because for you, it was not just that you were like moving to a new city and needed to figure out like the moving expenses piece of it. It was, I'm leaving this current job. I'm moving to a new city with all the new expenses. Then I'm going to be building up my client base, but I have to find a gym, find a job, whatever first, and then build up the client base. So you were kind of looking at a longer tunnel than maybe someone else who would just be like moving and starting a new job right away. So let's talk about the things that we implemented for you to make it through that tunnel without being terrified, like actually enjoying your ride through that tunnel. So tell me about what you remember about what we set up for you.
What did we set up for me? We talked about, what is it you call it?
The money flow.
The money flow.
Oh, the financial ecosystem. We use those interchangeably. Yes.
The financial, you see it with my hand gestures?
Yes, the web.
The financial ecosystem. So we had already kind of had conversations about what that money flow looked like just for my life in Michigan, because we, met and started working together when I was still had like another month of my job left. So we were already able to kind of start working with, a full-time job, full compensation, and, what makes me comfortable there. And then we had to completely like 180 change it for, like you've talked about on your Instagram, like survival season, but still feeling entirely capable financially. I'm set. I don't have to worry. And I know money's coming in later. So I know we found like a certain amount of spending fun money that I knew I felt comfortable with, which was technically for, survival season. But it was still more than enough to do the things that I love doing, which was getting coffee, getting my Jets pizza. If any Michiganders out there know what I'm talking about, you have to have one once a week. And so I love my food. Me and my boyfriend, very like food fueled people. We would be eating out a lot, et cetera, et cetera. So that still, upheld all the things that I wanted to do. And then we looked at what I had in savings, and we knew, okay, this savings needs to get me through November, December, and January, for that amount of money that we know is going to make me feel good. And I'm going to be able to pay for transit because I don't have a car anymore, pay for groceries, be able to pay for any sort of, any other last minute things that we may need. And so we were able to set that aside. So I knew right off the bat, okay, it's going to take me a minute, but I know I have 3 months of like money spending taken care of. We had our first like 2 months of rent money taken care of, so I didn't have to worry about that just yet. And then I remember I had a moment of panicking about the holidays.
I was going to bring up the holidays because this was right in the heart of the holidays.
Yeah. Right in the heart of the holidays. And I was like, Brooke, but I have to, shop, and it's Christmas, and like, I don't know how much everybody's going to want and how expensive that's going to be. And then you're like, okay, take a breath. Always take a second, breathe. And, we had already kind of set aside that monthly budget for myself for those 3 months, but you were like, okay, we know that you can survive on this amount of money. Why don't we, or no, we might have taken it from one of my savings buckets because we had transferred to Ally at the time, which I'm obsessed with, by the way.
A common thread.
But I believe you had introduced the idea of taking out of a bucket that I know I can later replenish. And in my mind, that was like a no touch, like, can't break that rule. You can't touch your buckets. But we knew that we could take out a substantial amount from there, and I would be able to later replenish that and then still have the money that I needed for spending for those 3 months until things started to pick back up.
Mm-hmm. And what I want to like point out for all of you listening is like, it's not like we started our time together, we set up the money flow, and it was just, that was it for the rest of our time together, right? It was, things were constantly popping up and changing and shifting, as is with life, as is with moving and like job transitioning. Like there were things that were unexpected that came up or that we were teasing out. So it was as we went along, not only shifting the strategy of the money flow, but then you like learning to trust yourself in how it was shifting and adjusting and being like, oh, I do have power over this. I do have options here. I think one of the big things that I remember that was like one of your thoughts was like, it's tight and I don't really have an option. I'm just stuck, kind of that energy, and working through that of like, no, let's lay out all the options. So I want to talk specifically about like when you said, yeah, I had 3 months of living expenses. I remember we separated them into buckets of like, this is November's money, this is December's money, and this is January's money. And we had a conversation as we were splitting up your savings where we didn't just decide that right off the bat. We laid out like 3 different options. It's like, okay, if you wanted 2 months, here's how much you would have for each of those months. But if your like nervous system wanted more flexibility and time, like to just ease into New York, then we could even extend that to 5 months. Like we played with your bare bones number and your cushy number and what that would look like. So instead of being like, this has to be my plan and this is the only amount I'm allowed to spend, you were in the driver's seat of like, I have multiple options. Which one feels the best for me in this season of life?
Even after working together, knowing that, okay, I was almost done with my 2nd month of spending, which like you said, was more of the comfortable side. So I knew I'd be able to like spend money different places, like going out with friends, because then I'd be seeing friends that I hadn't seen in a long time. And I knew that mentally and emotionally, that would be best for me. And with a job like personal training that is hard to start over, I was fortunate. And the whole point that I went home was I gained this year of experience. And I was like, okay, I am a different person from the first time that I moved. I have all this knowledge, experience with money, with this career that I've, created with personal training. I am going to kick ass and take names because I have to. Because after those 3 months, I ain't got shit. If I don't build my business, I will have nothing. And so from even just having this new mindset on money and knowing what I can do with it, I started to become not afraid or fearful that I was going to run out of money, but impatient that I didn't have enough money to implement all the things that I learned. And now I'm at a place where I'm like, oh, I'm implementing everything that I learned, and it feels so good. It feels so juicy.
Yeah. I remember there was a shift for you, right? Like near the end of our coaching where you had all of these tools and you set all the things up, and we actually planned out your future financial ecosystem. Like we had all of these money flow iterations. And then I remember you asking like, okay, so when I am making money and I've got these booked out clients, what does my flow look like? So we mapped out your new flow. And then it was after that point that there was a shift of like, I'm not panicked about getting money because I feel like I'm going to run out. I'm just so excited to be able to spend how I truly want to, save, invest, put money towards other things. Like everything was being led from desire. So it was excitement. And that also doesn't surprise me how quickly you filled up your client roster. So tell me about like when you moved, right? And you started like, you got the job at Equinox, talk me through that, and then talk about building your client base and like what was going through your head as you were increasing your income and your clients.
With onboarding at this particular gym, it takes about a month of doing some like Zoom calls. You're doing online learning. I was very fortunate. Knowing my experience at my gym in Michigan, I knew what kind of schedule I wanted. I knew what kind of money I wanted to make. And I told them I needed to fill up very quickly and I'm ready. They're like, it can be very overwhelming. I was like, give it to me. Like, I am ready. I need this. I know how this works now. So I got EquiFit cleared, which is you have to be cleared to be able to do these things. And they just like filled me up. I am no longer afraid to ask for this amount of money because I know it's worth it. And thank God I had that experience. I've changed people's lives already back in Michigan. I still keep in touch with clients. I was like, I know my worth. I know that I'm going to change people's lives here. There is an incentive for when you are a new trainer. And there are bonuses that you have the opportunity to get in the first 3 months of taking on clients. And I was like, I need that fucking money. And I want that fucking money. And especially with how the pay works and everything, the more clients you're getting, the more you could be paid, et cetera, et cetera. And so the first bonus, I only needed 4 clients. I was like, done. I would get that in 2 weeks. And sure shit, I did. And so once I kind of had that fire lit under my ass, I was like, oh, I'm going to hit all of them. And I hit the like second and third bonus like a couple weeks later. And I just was popping off. Like I was signing up people left and right. And now I have to be like picky about the EquiFits I get because I'm so full and I only have very specific times now. It feels so good. Like I had this confidence, not only from training, but also from our work together. Like I've already said, that I was like, okay, I need more so that like I can put it in my buckets. I have my buckets ready. I want to be taking my classes. I want to find a voice teacher, and kind of tying back to not diving into the industry, because this is a podcast about being a not starving artist. Where I'm like, no, okay, I know that I need to be financially set in a certain way before I can do all the things that I want to do, because unfortunately being an artist costs money sometimes. Networking costs money. And so knowing that and knowing the potential that I could be making and I am on my way to making, I can't even tell you how excited it's been this season of like okay, just like nose to the grindstone, really gotta pump it out. And I know it's all gonna be worth it because come summer, I'll be taking like dance classes every other day, being able to take voice lessons, going to see shows. I just saw my first 2 shows last weekend and it really, ignited that fire.
And we talked a lot about like negotiation, knowing your value and your worth and deciding what you wanted to be paid. Do you remember some of those conversations that we had back in October, November?
Yeah, absolutely. Part of it was me thinking about going independent, but in that realm, we were potentially looking at that, potentially looking at working for a gym and, talking about asking for more money. I did have an interview at a separate gym where I was asked how much I wanted to make, which you're not always asked. And I took that moment to ask for like double of what I know is standard at certain gyms. And I remember like messaging you and being like, oh my God, I did it. I asked for more and I didn't like freak out. I didn't like draw back or pretend like I was coy or shy. And the guy actually was like, oh yeah, okay, that sounds good. And I just remember being very surprised because I've never tried to ask for more than I thought I was worth.
Yeah, because we've been so conditioned as creatives, freelancers, gig workers that like we just accept our rate, right? We just accept or like we are always so desperate for money. Like you just take the job, like you don't really think about the value of your work or like what you actually want to be paid, not just what you'll settle for. And so I know that we did an exercise where you went and played with like your ideal spending plan, like your ideal numbers, what you wanted them to be. And you played with your ideal first. And then it was like, okay, what would that look like income wise if you could make that happen? So you figured out through that exercise, not just your like we figured out a range of like your bare minimum of what you would settle for, but then your ideal. So you knew that jobs that were below your bare minimum, like you weren't even gonna think about those. We're not even going to that interview. It was only the people who were above the bare minimum. And then you knew what your standards were. And then with bonuses and stuff, like you could be like, oh, but this could get me closer to the ideal. So we like reverse engineered the process so that it actually got you closer to what you wanted rather than trying to like fit your life into whatever the gym was going to offer you. You knew what you wanted and you made sure that the gym would be able to support that vision.
Right. And that kind of ties in with Equinox because the rate that you start out with, it's not exactly, what I was looking for, but I knew what I could be making. And so that was also, there's so many layers to pushing for myself and getting these clients. But that was a really big one is because I was like, oh, I could be making double this in like 3 months if I worked hard enough. Okay, I'm going to do it because I have in my brain, it wasn't like, oh, that seems scary and it seems too intimidating because I've had this experience and I'm not afraid to ask for the amount that, we charge at our gym. And I was like, no, there's no other option. Like I need to work my ass off so that I can get to that amount of money. And soon I'm going to be my boyfriend's sugar mama.
Love that energy.
Not my words, those are his.
I love it. And like also noting that you said season, right? You're not like, I'm going to hustle for the rest of my life and I'm just going to keep growing and making money and making money. Like, that there was a hustle period, right? Become the sugar mama, be at a place of ease where then maybe even starting your own business, but you've got the financial comfort to be able to do that also while you're pursuing acting. So it's like you're navigating it through seasons, which is the healthiest way to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's even, the season of, being patient, which is very hard, but knowing what that end goal was and honestly having a very supportive partner that would remind me on days when I would get down because I'm not going to just always be able to like talk myself through and be resilient that way. Like I have my moments and there were moments when this was the best part. I would sign somebody up 1 week and I'd be on such a high. I was like, oh my God, I signed somebody up. I'm invincible. I'm going to sign so many people up. I'm going to get there so fast. And then I wouldn't sign somebody up for like 5 more days. And I'd come home crying. I'd be like, oh my God, I'm not going to hit the bonus. I suck. I must be a terrible trainer. And then I would sign somebody up the next day. And it was just like, it's like wave, this roller coaster. So having that end goal in mind and knowing what I was working towards was so invaluable. Like I can't even describe it.
So talk to me about like the excitement of like wanting to make more money and book out your client roster, right? And that drive because you're excited about the tools and the things that you want to use your money for. Tell us about some of them.
My boyfriend and I just had our first like sit down financial meeting
Fun.
the other day. And we're at this phase of life. We've looked at engagement rings, and that's news to you.
How fun.
So we're preparing for like that phase of life. We talk about we're not having kids anytime soon because he's also an actor and we have dreams and goals, but we talk about having kids like in our 30s. And so one of the things we sat down and talked about was just our budgets and what we're bringing in, stuff that we want to save for. We have like bare bones at the apartment. We've kind of decided, we'll probably stay here another year or two, really make it a home, because we didn't do that in our apartment in Michigan because we knew we would eventually come to New York. So we talked about budgeting for like the next things we want to buy for the apartment, the list of things we'd like to buy, but like our next big purchase is going to be rugs. Like we want a big rug for the living room, for our entranceway. So that's, as a couple, kind of what we're excited about saving for. And it's very exciting. It's very cool to even be in this phase of life. I feel like an adult.
How fun that you feel like an adult. How fun.
And then in terms of personal like goals, and I remember what I was going to say about seasons, not only with money, I was going to say seasons also with my two passions, because I don't like to think of personal training as my survival job. I think about it as my second career, because it is something that I'm still very passionate about. And I am passionate about my own health, about helping people. I love teaching. I work with a lot of women, how to strength train and how to find their power, not worry about that number on the scale, and just find their confidence in the gym, because we women have a hard time stepping into the gym sometimes. And so the way I've explained this, I have a client who's in the theater industry, and we were talking, and I was saying, I honestly haven't done any auditions yet. I need to still work on my book. I need to work on my website, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm really focused on building my business right now, because the whole reason I got into this is so I could have the flexibility to also pursue my dreams. And so I kind of have thrown out that timeline, and I know that I have what it takes to get back into things, to start auditioning, book stuff come this fall or even next year. Like if this year is all about, saving, starting to take classes and stuff. So tying back in what we were talking about, I want to be taking multiple dance classes per week. I want to have a consistent voice teacher again. I want to be taking, there's a class that one of my best friends is taking that I have a lot of interest in. Helps you build your book, know what pieces to take into the room, and you're meeting composers and people that are in the industry. And so those are some of the things that I'm saving for. And I, again, with the timeline, have thrown out, like, I'm not racing to, be in anything right now. If I'm in those classes and I'm bettering myself and I'm getting prepared to dive into audition season next year, I'm happy with that. Mm-hmm. I have thrown out that pressure of taking whatever I can, whatever gig I can, like you talked about, like knowing my worth, and having this side career that will support my dreams and will be flexible when the time comes. It's such a kismet feeling, because back when I left New York, my life was completely different. Like this was 3 years ago. I left in 2020. And I moved home to do this and build this side career, this side hustle that I could bring back with me. And now I've done it and I'm very good at it. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but like, I know my clients love me and I love them. And I've been very fortunate to have met these people, and they know what my end goal is and they haven't run away. So that's always good. And yeah, just this excitement to, I haven't done it yet. I haven't spent the money on the things, but just knowing like I'm building my buckets. I have my arts bucket. I have my bucket for my gym stuff that I know I'll inevitably have to pay for, because you have to, keep doing your certifications and stuff. But knowing that I'm at a point where I can support my dreams and also enjoy what I'm doing when I'm not pursuing my dreams. It's there are no words. And I wish more artists would find another passion that can be flexible and that can bring them, the income of their dreams, and not have to have that, starving lifestyle. Because I've done it, but I burnt out.
Yeah.
We can only do so much while also, grabbing at straws to do what we actually want to do.
That's so key. And it's so important that we all, like, as artists collectively, continue to say and remind ourselves that we're not less of an artist because we have a parallel career, because we desire money, because we want to live a luxurious lifestyle. Like, truly, artists are the lifeblood of this earth, right? They are. They've got
men. What would we have done in COVID if it weren't for art?
Right.
How many shows did people binge watch during the pandemic?
Right. And so, like, you as an artist in our artistic community, like, knowing that it is your responsibility to have a long career, because one of my favorite artists, her name is Queen Hervey. She has a podcast and she always says, "We need your art. We need your art." Like, the world needs your art. And so whatever you need to do to make sure that your career has longevity, that you as an artist don't burn out. And a huge piece of that is the financial piece. And that doesn't mean every artist has to go out and like start their own business or like get a totally like separate parallel career, but to start thinking in the way of, I'm not less of an artist because I want money. I'm not less of an artist because I also love other things, right? Like, I had a stint where I was working for Margaritaville. My God, like, Margaritaville has nothing to do with acting, but I loved it and I wasn't going to feel guilty about it. The fact that you're an incredibly kick-ass personal trainer, right? Like, helping the world in that way too doesn't take away from your art at all. And that financial piece of this parallel career takes the pressure off of your art to pay your rent. Like, I think of our art and our creativity as this beautiful, like, it's not delicate, but it's juicy and it's yummy and it's like so fun. And so when you put the pressure of like, pay my rent, financially support me, it's just, it gets heavier and it gets harder. And you're right, you burn out so much easier. So like, what a beautiful gift that you gave to your art by saying, I'm going to have a parallel career and I'm going to get money coaching and I'm going to figure this money shit out. So that way, like, I can dive back into the artistic realm, not only letting my creativity be my creativity, but that I can now even use my money to blossom my creativity. Here's some classes, here's some time off, here's some, like, you can throw money at this delicious blob of creation, right? To let it flower. So I love that you've done that for yourself. And I'm glad you brought that up because, again, I want all artists to hear that like, you're not less of an artist because you desire that.
Right. Or that even, if you're in a season like I am, where I kind of had to put that on the back burner, for lack of a better term, that also doesn't mean I'm any less of an artist. Just because I'm not in something or I'm not in classes, I still sing in my living room and I'm still, I'm still dreaming and desiring. But at this moment, I also need to pay my rent. I also need to pay for my cats. I need to pay for groceries because those are hella expensive. And I would rather cook all my food at home than eat out all the time in New York City, which is also very expensive. But also not feeling like I have to grasp its, pull out of my savings or have no idea where I'm going to get the money for some of these things, which is what it has looked like in the past, because I would always just bucket black out and spend any extra money. And then when the time came to have an important payment, I wouldn't have it. So I was living that way. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. And if it means taking a break, a hot second to build that career, build that life, so that when the opportunity comes and I can start doing that stuff, I will happily do it. I don't have to, try to find the money to be able to support the dreams I do have.
Yeah. So because you brought up the fuck it blackouts, right, I want to talk about them. So for those of you who don't know, a fuck it blackout is when it's like impulsive spending, those urges, right? Where like you're thinking you've like had a stressful day and you want to order DoorDash and you're like, but I shouldn't order DoorDash, but I really want it. And you feel yourself going into like, fuck it, I'm just going to do it. And then you press buy, or like online shopping or something in a store. Like this can take so many different forms, but that's the fuck it blackout. So that was one of the things that I know that we were working on during our time together, the fuck it blackout. You said something at the very beginning of our time together about like your luxurious taste.
Yeah.
But something like you had a phrase that you said of like really loving like luxury and all the things, but not feeling like you had the money for it. And so then that would lead to a lot of fuck it blackouts and a lot of impulsive spending. So what do you think was the cure for that? And also now, how do you feel and think about spending now?
Sure. I think buckets helped a lot, and literally thinking of, okay, once, I'm looking at my money flow, being sure to set aside a certain amount so that I can make those fun purchases and not worry about it. I think it definitely was a very emotional thing, and I am very driven by my emotions. I'm not a very logical thinker. I do have expensive taste, and I used to work in retail, and I would have moments of like, I lived at home, so I didn't have a ton of bills to pay, but I was so not thinking about my future and about putting aside money or anything. And so I would buy these like really nice purses, or I would buy the nice coat that I got an extreme discount on, but it was still expensive. And then I would just beat myself up when I didn't have money for the things that counted in the future. And so with your approach of creating a money flow that already creates room for those fun purchases, helps bring me back down to earth a little bit. And, would I still like to spend all of my money on all the skincare, all the makeup, everything that I've ever wanted? Sure. But I know that with the system that I've created down the line, I will be able to build that bucket so that I'm able to make a fun purchase like that. Or I don't think I ever have like a certain thing in mind to buy. It's not like, oh my God, I really want that Celine purse or something. Like that's not really something that I want, but like I, need new summer clothes. And so that's something that I'm already like thinking about with that extra leftover money that goes into my money flow. Like, okay, how much am I going to set aside for my skincare? Like already putting it in my money flow, my buckets. How much do I want to spend this summer on clothes? And once I hit that limit, then go ahead, like have your shopping spree, and just having that rationale and having that structure so that like, hey, I've got future Katelyn taken care of for these fun purchases that she wants to make, and I can still make those. Or we even budgeted it into my spending free for all, which are the names of my accounts. In Ally, which we talked about not having it be a boring name and have it be something exciting. And I even referenced them like that to Sal the other day when we were talking about finances, because that really helped me be like, oh, this money that I have for these next 2 weeks is for my fun coffee trips, going out with girlfriends, and then like buying that Glossier that I need, because it's not a super expensive purchase, but like I know I can go get that, and it's not like I'm completely blacking out and it's not in my money plan already.
Right. Because luxury taste isn't inherently a bad thing. I have luxury taste. You have luxury taste. Liking luxury is not a bad thing. Like it's such a fun, delicious thing.
I work at a luxury gym. Like
exactly. Right.
Like luxury.
So the difference is that, and what I remember the difference for you being like this clicked in is some of the like luxury purchasing, again, like hard air quotes on that was happening was like blackouts, and it was impulsive, and it was trying to like numb something or soothe something instead of it actually being about the luxury thing. So it was being present in those moments, and like you can buy the luxury things, but it's proactively deciding, I want this luxury thing. I'm going to decide yes, and it's a part of my plan. And then also planning to also have wiggle room so you can impulsively buy some luxury things too. Like we'll put that into the plan, right? So I just want to make very clear that liking luxury isn't a bad thing. It's just about planning to put the luxury into your day-to-day, your month-to-month plan, and knowing that current you and future you both deserve luxury. So like, how dare you try and keep all the luxury just in present you's life? Like give future you some of that luxury too. Exactly. So it's like, it's not like, oh, I have to save. It's like, no, like I get a purse now. And like also Katelyn in the future gets a purse.
Exactly. And that's similar with like us buying stuff for the apartment. It's like, okay, we know we're going to stay here. So we're going to get some nice rugs. Like, have you ever heard of Ruggable?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'm sure many people have. So we have cats and they have accidents sometimes. So it's like, why not invest in something that we're going to have in here for a couple of years that we'll be able to wash. And if it gets ruined, we don't just throw it out. But seeing like, okay, yeah, we can set that aside in the next coming weeks and it's not going to be forever. I think that's a big thing that we worked on together and I had to work through a lot. That it felt, I'm very like black and white. And so when it's like, oh, I'd be like, oh, this feels so like constricting. And like this spending I have for the next 3 months, blah, 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 blah. And I would just like, go off on my anxieties or my worries. And you would always bring me back down with, this is just for right now. Like in a couple months, you're going to have a full clientele again, and you're going to be making stupid ass money. And you'll be able to do all these things that we are talking about, which is wild that was like what 6-7 months ago, and now here we are doing and being in this season where I am about to be able to do all those things.
Do you have a couple of specific shifts or aha moments or things when it came to some of that mindset emotional work that stuck with you or that stand out when you think back?
That was the biggest one of just because this is the way that my money flow has to be, doesn't mean that it's going to be that way forever. And there are spending, saving, surviving seasons. Or, the idea of taking money out of buckets. It was my tax bucket. That's what it was.
That's what it was. Did you all hear that? I told Katelyn to take money out of her tax bucket. No, but it's true. But there was because we talked about that specifically. I drew a diagram for you, and we talked about how you are allowed to extend the financial burden across the entire timeline of you, right? Mm-hmm. There's past you, there's current you, and there's future you. And so much of the time we feel like the entire financial burden of our entire life is on us currently in this present moment. We have to be paying off all the debt and saving all the savings and putting everything into our retirement and our investing. And it's so much pressure. So when you're in a season of sustaining or you're in a season of spending, right? And you're making a big life transition and it's a season, and there comes a time where you're like, am I going to like eat ramen this month, or am I going to take a little money out of my tax bucket because I know I'm not going to have to pay taxes for another 5 months? Can I use some of that to buffer and not eat just ramen this month and enjoy my first month in this city, knowing that future Katelyn, who's going to have a full client roster, can shoulder some of that financial burden, put a little bit more than she normally would into her tax bucket to be able to take some of that weight off. Like you can extend that. I do remember that conversation being very pivotal. It was the taxes bucket. I love that.
Yeah. Another big one was always going back to the money flow. So I get very stuck in my head. And so sometimes I would be like, with some of the tighter checks that I had, because even though we call it ramping, like ramping up very quickly, I would still have a paycheck where it was a little less than what I wanted. I remember there was one that it was the first time I was able to contribute to rent, because I think there was a month there where I still kind of couldn't. We had the resources to be able to pay for it, but I really wanted to be able to contribute to rent. And I remember I had a paycheck that I had to take my entire rent out of, instead of like setting aside half in each paycheck, because I'm paid biweekly. And it was my first bonus. That's what it was. And I had to take out all my entire month's rent and my spending money. I had nothing left over. And I found myself wanting to panic. And like, I probably cried about it because I'm just a crying processor as well as a verbal processor. And, talking it out with my boyfriend, he kind of brought me back to, hey, it's just right now. How awesome that you were able to still have spending money and be able to contribute to rent. Like your next month's paychecks are going to be even bigger, and you'll be able to have that extra money to put in your buckets, because that was the biggest thing that I was so excited for, was having this leftover money to save for things. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And so when I run into moments like that, or, when I see how much I'm going to be getting in my paycheck, because I can look at my pay stubs, the first thing I do is I write it all down. And I write out, okay, what do I have to pay for rent? What are the utilities? What is my spending money? What do I have to pay? Like this coming paycheck, I have to buy a bridesmaid's dress. I have to get a haircut. And I'm not thinking about, okay, what bucket do I have to take that out of? I'm just taking that out because I'm like, I have to get that done. I don't even need to factor that into my buckets yet. And then I pulled out all the things that I needed to pay for. And then it was like, oh, I still have a considerable amount left over. Am I going to be able to put, all of that in one bucket? I could if I needed to, but I still have this money that I could evenly distribute, or, which we've done in the past. I put a little more in one bucket because that was a more urgent thing I needed to save for, or et cetera, et cetera. And writing it out and seeing what I actually have instead of just like getting in my head about it helps a lot for me to walk myself through things and be like, oh, I actually ended up with more than I even thought I was going to. Or if I didn't end up with a lot, it's that moment of, okay, that's right now. What do I need to do in the future so that my paycheck never goes like below this again?
Mm-hmm. That's so good, because this is a huge shift from a year ago where there was so much avoidance of even looking at the numbers. And now it's like a habitual thing. It's not an obsessive thing. It's just a habitual thing that you do every paycheck, where you're like, I'm going to look at this and make a plan for it. And it's like, you're talking about it like it's no big deal. And I'm remembering Katelyn from a year ago being like, I will not be looking at my bank accounts. Have no idea what's going on in there. So how cool that like, you're just speaking of it as it's like, yeah, this is normal. Of course, I just make a plan with my money. That's just what Katelyn does. How cool.
I look forward to it every week.
That's amazing.
So excited.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, what can I do this time? Or like, where can I put it? And yada, yada, yada. Yeah.
Yeah.
I still haven't changed what my biweekly spending is. And I'm still technically on survival mode spending. Just seeing how it takes me. It feels good, because we were talking about it when my boyfriend and I had our meeting, and it was kind of the first time it clicked. I was like, oh, I'm technically setting aside what I set aside for those 3 months. And it's not even my cushy spending. Yeah. And I'm getting to the point where I can start giving myself cushy spending. But I also look at, okay, if I'm good on this though, and I'm able to set all this other stuff set aside this stuff for the things that I want to do in the future, I'm cool with that. But I also know if like there's a week, like my dad's coming into town this weekend, and my mom was in that's a really good example. So my mom was in not this past weekend, the weekend before. And she had bought our tickets for our shows. And so we were going to be paying for, some of her meals and, making sure she was taken care of. And because of where I'm at, I was able to set aside like a certain amount of money to cover food spending just for that weekend. And I still had my spending for the 2 weeks following.
Wow.
It felt really good to be like, I was also able to not panic about that. It makes me feel really good to know that I'm technically on my lower end of spending, but I'm still good. Like it covers groceries. It covers my coffee trips. It covers going out to eat. Have I overdrafted sometimes? Yes, but only like twice. And all the other times, I know one of the things that I mentioned to you, I was like, but my bank account can't go to zero, right? And you were like, why wouldn't you use every last penny that's in your account?
Right. And then I was like, what if it does go to zero? What if it accidentally goes over and like, oops, now you have to pull $5 from your savings? Like, what's the consequence? None consequences.
Literally nothing. And so now, because like when that's happened, because like one of my automated payments went through and I like didn't catch it, I was like, oh, whoops. And then I go look at my buckets and I knew where I could pull it from, and then it automatically got refilled the next paycheck.
Yeah. So with your survival spending, so I want to clarify some things too. Like taking your spending account to zero is incredible because that's why you split up your money into different accounts, right? It's because if you take your spending account to zero, like all the money that you've decided to spend that month, you take it to zero, that's great because all your other accounts are still filled. Like you're not taking your entire money to zero. So it's fun and also gets you comfortable with like money is meant to be used. Like I don't feel unsafe when I see numbers decreasing because that's what they're supposed to do in my spending account. So I want to ask you about your survival money because we used that term and that term feels like a ramen budget, right? But your survival number, we created a number that did not feel deprivational and clearly is even less deprivational or like less survivally than we thought because you are still comfortably living with that number. How fun. So tell me more about like, what do you get to do with your survival number, air quotes?
So my survival number would include I've been doing some like group fitness classes. There's one specific one that I do once a month that's like coming up this weekend. So that would pay for something like that. That is my trips for coffee. That is my lunch when I haven't packed anything for lunch. I have a Sweetgreens right across the street, so I go there a lot, or I'd go get a bagel sandwich for breakfast. So yeah, it's going out with friends. It's going to pick up a couple like things of mascara if I need them, or it also includes my groceries. Which now that I'm making more, and this is a conversation that we had, I'm looking at making that a separate thing outside of my fun spending money. Because we know how much we spend on groceries and it's very consistent. So it's turning into a fixed expense in our eyes. And I'm at the point where that doesn't need to be a part of my fun money anymore, which is also very cool.
Last couple of questions. One, I want to know about Norway travel credit card. We talked about credit cards at the very end of our time together because you have a wedding in Norway this summer, right?
Correct.
Tell us about it and tell us about the credit card.
One of my best friends is getting married in Norway. And then 3 or 4 days after the wedding, I'm in a wedding in Michigan. So I knew we'd be taking a lot of flights. I also have had other weddings pop up that we're going to have to go to, or I'm going to have to go to, whatever. And so I knew you did a lot of credit card hacking, and I had always wanted to do that. But again, like credit is like, if you don't know much about it, it's like this very like, oh, don't do too much with it. Like, don't use your credit card too much, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas there is benefit in using your credit card and working with the point system or the reward system that credit card has. And if you know you have the expenses to pay that off, then great. So we knew we were going to be traveling a lot. So I had asked you, your recommendation for like a couple credit cards, and I ended up going with Chase Sapphire Preferred, which literally I think I messaged you after I signed up for it, and I geeked out, one, because of looking at all the different ways you can get points and the way you can use them, and two, I opened at like a higher credit limit than I ever thought that I would get. And I remember being like, I'm sorry, I'm allowed to spend up to how much? And that was also very rewarding and cool because I have a Discover credit card. It's the only one I've ever had. I have good credit, but it was just a cool, like, oh, I'm deserving of that much. That's awesome. I've worked to get here. But anyway, so we're going with me, my partner, my mom, and my brother. And so what we decided to do is use that credit card once I got it to pay for all of our flights, because the bonus that they were offering was if you spent $4,000, I think in the first 6 months, which was a good timeline, but we were like, no, we'll do it in 6 days. And so I used it to purchase all of our flights, which got us very, very close to that number. And then we just used the card on groceries, stuff that we knew we were already going to have to spend and we could pay back easily. We already had money set aside for the wedding, or we knew we'd be getting our tax return that would help cover for that kind of stuff. So then we hit that limit and I got 60,000 points, which equates to hundreds of dollars in flying. So then using those travel points, we are actually probably tomorrow going to book our flight back to Detroit, back home, for I have to leave for a weekend to go to another very close friend's wedding in August. And I know that my points will cover that. And I know we're going to have a million other weddings in the years coming. Like, this is not the end. We're in this phase of life where that is happening constantly.
Yeah. So, and when you like demystify credit, because I know we had some like just like education sessions where we talked about credit and you watch the videos, and it's like when you remove the fear and the scariness of like credit is bad from your brain, and you actually understand how it works and how to utilize it for your benefit, you're able to do things like that, right? You're like, now I'm thinking I have this trip to Norway and I've got this wedding, and like I can get the points this way and then use the points this way, and you end up with free flights, which I think is so cool. That again then gives you more wiggle room in your money flow, right? To be able to do other things. Are there any other takeaways, wins, accomplishments, ahas from our time together or post-coaching that we haven't talked about yet that you'd like to share?
Hitting all of my bonuses at this new job. I knew where I wanted to be come summer and how I wanted to use my money and how I wanted to create my money flow, that I was like, I have the flow, I have the system, I need to fill it with money. So the only way to do that is to hit these bonuses, is to just take off running. And with the tools that I learned from you, I'm excited. I look forward to breaking down my money and seeing where I can put it and seeing where it can go. Like, it was old Katelyn would have never been like, oh yeah, I want to set up like my 401k or my like Roth IRA. And now I'm very much ready to do that. And I'm in this phase of life where I am with a partner that I see a future with. And there's so many things that we talk about doing, and the life we want to lead, and the kids we want to raise, and the life we want to give them. And so it's more than just us now. And like, we're growing up, and, our parents always talk to us about like, invest in your future, blah, 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 but you can easily let that go over your head. But then you get older and you're like, oh shit, like I really better start working on that now because I want to be able to do all the things I want to do when I'm older, when I have children. I want to provide, and I want to make sure that we are set in that sense.
I love that so much. That's beautiful. Okay. So my last question is, for anyone listening who is thinking about joining one-on-one coaching, what would you say to them?
Do it. I had the right idea, but I had the wrong implementation. And so for like we've talked about, my coaching was very mental, and it was breaking down those emotions. Like, I had a hard time having conversations with my partner about money, with my parents about money. And so now that has become so much easier because I'm confident in how I control my money. And I know that everyone has their own way. And part of it is like understanding where my partner comes from, and, talking about how I approach things and how we can start working together to talk about that stuff. So I guess the other thing I would say is just knowing that even if you think you have it all together, or you're like, I'm so far gone that I have no idea what to do, Brooke has a way and a system to make your coaching individualized, make it, focused on the stuff that you specifically need work on.
Thank you so much, Katelyn. It's been so lovely to talk with you today. And I'm so glad that everyone got to hear your journey, your story, all the things that you've been able to do. So excited you're in the city now and kicking ass.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Come join me on Instagram for more on how to build a simple, sexy relationship with your money. My Instagram handle is @NotStarvingArtists. And if you want to dive deeper with me, head to the show notes to learn more about one-on-one coaching. If you love this episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend that you want to get rich with.